This is Carter Phipps for What is Enlightenment Magazine, and I'm interviewing Dr. Jim Tucker at the Division of Personality Studies at the University of Virginia. Maybe you could tell me just how you got involved with this whole, because you came from a very different background, so how did you get involved with the whole idea of children who remember their reincarnation or past lives?
Well, I trained here at the University of Virginia in psychiatry and child psychiatry, and then I was in private practice in child psychiatry. I stayed in the area, and the work was going well. I wasn't feeling particularly fulfilled by it, and then my wife was open to a lot of alternative ways of thinking, of seeing psychics or meditating or whatever, which got me curious about it. So I was reading.
Had that been part of your own life at all?
No,
or did you
no.
So it was very different.
Yeah. But with her interest, it got me curious. So I was reading various things, and I happened to be reading one of Ian Stevenson's books about children who report past life memories. When we saw an article in the local newspaper that this division had gotten a small grant to study a new study on the effects of near-death experiences on the people who have them. So my wife said, well, why don't you give them a call and see if they need help interviewing patients? And I thought it would be something interesting to do, along with just seeing patients in the office all the time. So I called them up, and they said, sure, we might need help, come on. And initially, I was just, for several months, I was just coming for the research lunch an hour a week. Mm-hmm. And then Ian asked me if I could come in earlier and evaluate some medical records of patients who had had near-death experiences. So I started doing that, and then he asked me if I wanted to take a trip to Asia to see some cases. Uh-huh. Then I was working half-time, and then in 2000 I gave up my practice completely and came on full-time.
Did it, when you initially were exposed to the material that he was doing, did it shock you, the kind of material he was uncovering? Did it surprise you, or? Well,
it interested me, I guess would be my best reaction. I mean, when I was in training, I had heard about him a little bit because he had been chairman of the department, years before I came. He had stepped down in 1967, and I didn't come until 86, but people would occasionally mention him. So I knew, in one or two sentences, the type of work he was doing, right. But I had never read anything by him until I was reading that book.
Well, maybe you could just describe in the broadest sense what it is that this division is doing. What is this work?
The work involves very young children who spontaneously report having memories of previous lives. And at this point, we've got over 2,500 cases registered in our files from all over the world. They're easiest to find in cultures with a belief in reincarnation, and that may just be because people are more likely to talk about them there.
Right.
Or maybe there are truly more cases there. But in any case, we've got them from all over the world. Getting more and more American cases, particularly since we set up our website. Right. But there are young children, usually around the age of 2 or 3, who will start saying that they have lived before. Some describe being a deceased family member, but others describe being strangers in other locations. And often people have then gone to those other locations and found that, in fact, somebody has died whose life matches the details given by the child. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do as much as possible is to verify both what the child said and how accurate those statements are truly for the person who died. Mm-hmm. There are some cases with birthmarks, so whenever possible we try to get autopsy reports or medical records to verify. So again, as much as possible, we don't accept anything sort of at face value, but try to see if what people think they remember is really what happened.
What constitutes a good case, would you say? Would that one that you research that goes in the files? Yeah. What elements does it have to be convincing? And also maybe what percentage of cases are good?
Yeah.
Do you hear about 10 potential cases for every one that's really good, or?
Well, it really varies, and I mean, for a case to be registered doesn't necessarily mean that it's incredibly convincing, but just that it does have certain features. It has to have at least two of a series. One would obviously be that the child has talked about a previous life, but then others would be either a birthmark, either what's called an announcing dream, where someone, usually the mother, has a dream where the previous person is asking to come back.
That's common too, right?
It is common. Can't give you exact percentage, but it happens in a distinct minority. Other would be behavioral features, such as themes in their play that seem to fit the previous life. And there may be one or two other things on the list. It may be on their prediction of rebirth. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes before the previous person died, they'll make predictions about where they'll come back.
Right, sure.
So anyway, if a case has at least two of those, then we register it. And to be registered, it has to be not just that a person's saying, "Oh, when I was young, I used to talk about this," but that there's somebody who can verify that, in fact, they did talk about it, either a parent or an older sibling. So that gets it in the files, and some cases are, of course, much stronger than others. What would constitute a great case would be where the child makes a number of specific statements, and this is the critical part, somebody writes down the statements before anyone goes to verify if they're true. Most of the time that doesn't happen. People aren't thinking that they're trying to say this for posterity. They're just wondering for themselves, whether they can find somebody who matches. And I mean, a lot of these cases in villages in Asia, I mean, people aren't documenting a lot anyway. But now we've got, I think it's at last count, it was 33 cases where there is written documentation of the statements beforehand. But even in the ones where there's not, in a lot of these cases, the children have made these statements repeatedly over a number of years. So, and we've got a number of witnesses. So, eyewitness testimony is never 100% guaranteed, obviously. But if you've got a number of witnesses saying, "Yeah, for several years the kid said this," then there's no reason to discount that.
Maybe could you give me an example of what's a favorite case? What's a favorite example of what you're talking about?
Well, one case which does not have written records, but one that I find quite interesting, is a little girl in Sri Lanka named Purnima. And this is one that actually a colleague of ours, Erlander Haraldson from Iceland, investigated. She started talking about having a previous life, and then one night on TV, the family was watching a special or something, and there was a famous temple in Sri Lanka, the Kalaniya Temple, which was on TV. She saw it and recognized it, and started talking about previous life, and made a number of statements saying that she had been an incense maker. She had been riding her bicycle selling incense sticks when she had been hit by a truck or bus, hit by a large vehicle and killed. And she even named the brands of incense, and these were ones that were not available in their local area because the Kalaniya Temple was like 150 miles away. So her parents dad was a principal and mom was a school teacher, and they took a school trip to this temple because it's a well-known one in Sri Lanka. She went with them, and while she was there, she said that she lived on the other side of the river that flowed by the temple. So they didn't do anything at that point about the case, but she continued to talk about it. And eventually a new teacher came to town whose wife lived in Kalaniya, so on the weekends he would go there. So the dad told him about it, and this new teacher and his brother-in-law decided to investigate to see if they could find somebody who matched the girl's statements. And the brother-in-law in particular didn't believe in reincarnation, but they were curious about it.